It's important to remember that when I'm about to give this lecture, that I was an atheist for many, many years. From the time I was about 16 to the time I was 28. Because that will help you to understand the first story I'm going to begin with this lecture with. Because when you're an atheist, you reject God outright. And when you do such a thing, you're committing a grave and dangerous wrong. Grave and dangerous because you are harming yourself, your soul, your person, in very profound ways. And when you convert to Islam, there's a lot of repair work to do. Because you've done such damage to yourself. You've built up so much pride, so much vanity, so many harmful qualities that it's going to take some time to break them down and to build all over again and to construct your character. The account I'm about to begin this story with is not flattering to me. It's actually very embarrassing. And I have a difficult time sharing it with you, because it doesn't put me in a very good light. But I do think it says something about the mercy and the glory and the grandeur of God, of Allah, the Almighty and the Merciful. Put in a position of having to defend myself. The only difficulty I really had was telling my mother that I had become a Muslim, because she was a very devout Christian. And then I became an atheist. That was a big shock in her life. But when I became a Muslim, that was even worse as far as she was concerned. And I had a difficult time telling her. A couple days after I became a Muslim, I called her on the phone. And she was the first person that I personally notified about what I had done. And it was a very emotionally charged 3 weeks, that semester break, when I went home and had to defend what I had done to my parents, because I had to explain Islam to them from A to Z. And we were up till 5 in the morning every night, my mother and I, discussing religion for like 2 weeks straight, exhausting each other. But in the end, she came to have a healthy respect for my religion. At one point she said, "I understand why you became a Muslim. A person who thinks the way you do," I wasn't quite sure what that meant, but a person who thinks the way you do, I can understand why that religion would definitely appeal to them. And then she said to me, "But I'm sorry, son, but I can never become a Muslim." And after that, we agreed to discuss it for a long time, and we did. But finally, she asked me at one stage not to discuss it anymore. And so we just hardly ever discuss it anymore. Unless she brings it up, then I'll discuss it with her. But I'll never bring it up first, because she immediately becomes defensive and has a very difficult time with it. So thank you. So you can imagine my reaction when I went on to the next page, which began the second surah of the Quran, entitled The Cow, and it began Aleph, Lam, Mim. That is the book wherein, no doubt, is guidance for those who have fear, have taqwa. I was shocked. It was just a voice from heaven was calling down to me. I had no sooner just prayed for guidance, semi-consciously, and now the next surah was answering my prayer. That. They translated it this, but this author happened to translate it as that, and I'm glad he did, because that's the literal translation. That! What? That? This? This book? That book! What book? This book? That book is the book wherein, no doubt, is guidance for those who have fear, who have taqwa, religious consciousness. I was stunned. And so as I read through the Quran, I was intrigued immediately. What does it say? So I started reading through the Quran. And in the beginning it describes the people who will be guided by this revelation. It's as if it was written for a non-believer. I'm always surprised when Muslims think that it's read for believers and you shouldn't share it with non-believers. Its principal audience originally were mostly non-believers. They're the ones that heard it. When I read it, I felt it was definitely read for a non-believer. I'm not saying it's written for everyone. It's revealed for everyone. But I could feel it talking to me. It begins by describing its audience. Who will benefit most by this? Who will benefit least by this? Who will be in sort of the middle? Describes the believers and their qualities. 3 or 4 verses. Talks about the people who have a completely closed mind. They won't even consider this. They won't even think about it. They don't want to be bothered. Talks about them in about a line and a half. They won't consider it. No use wasting time on it. Then it talks for about 12 lines, verse 8 through 20 of the second surah, 13 lines about all those people in between, which was me. I may have been an atheist, but I was willing to listen. I may have been an atheist, but I was curious. I wasn't an outright rejecter. Just couldn't satisfy my doubts. But here I was, in the middle, and that was me, and I knew it. As you read through that second surah, it summarizes Islam's major themes. And then from there on out, you're sort of hooked. Right? What's your first question? Well, your first question is, what's the purpose of life? Why did God create us? Did He put us here just to punish us? You start reading the second surah, and it begins to answer that question. The angels ask, why create this being who creates suffering and sheds blood when we celebrate your praises and glorify your holy name? You know what reaction was when I read that? Wait a minute, that's my question. Why put us here on earth to suffer? Why make this creature who could commit terrible wrongs and put him in this environment where he could exercise his most negative and destructive tendencies? Why didn't you make us angels and just put us up into heaven if it was within your power? That was my question. I had asked it of priests, I had asked it of rabbis, I had asked it of Buddhist monks, I had asked it of Hindus, I had asked it of Hare Krishnas on campus, I had asked it of everybody. Here I was, not but several lines into the Quran, verse 30 of the second surah, and my question is put there in the mouth of the angels. Slowly but surely the Quran begins to unravel and answer. And as it does, it takes you through so many different facets and angles of life. It interjects different parts of its message as it lures you into its design. And so as I read the Quran and proceeded along, I was trapped. It was written. I felt it was written perfectly for a non-believer. And so I would very much encourage you, if you have somebody, and he is honestly interested in Islam but feels he doesn't have the time, point him in the direction of the Quran. A good interpretation, one that you found that you trust in English, and get him in that direction. Nothing is more powerful in showing people the way to Islam than the Quran.
Shalom alaikum, brothers and sisters. I want to just briefly tell you, I'm sometimes asked, how come you're a Muslim? And I tell them, well, God showed me that I'm a Muslim. For the first 35 years of my life, I was a disbeliever. I knew there is no God, I didn't see any need for God, and I didn't believe in God.
السلام عليكم. بدأ بتحية الإسلام وبدأ يسرد قصته في اعتناق الإسلام. لقد مر عليه 35 عاما من حياته لم يكن مسلما ولم يكن مؤمنا بالمرة.
But ever since I was small, I was interested in science. And as my knowledge of science grew, 25 years ago, in basically a flash, I came to the conclusion that the universe is so perfectly made and everything so perfectly matches together that there must be God. So in 1 second, I went from certainty there is no God to certainty there must be God and only one God.
يقول أنه كان مهتما دائما بالعلم وكان يرى إحسان الصنع في هذا العالم وكيف يسير وكان يقول لنفسه لابد أن هناك إلها يحكم تسير هذا العالم من اهتمامه بالعلم.
So I accepted there is God. I said, أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله.
وبذلك أدرك أن هناك إلها وشهد الشهادة.
But I was not looking for a religion. I thought all religions are wrong. Christians say this is one. The Jews said, Jews are chosen people, and if you're not Jew, you're not chosen. And about Islam, I only had negative information.
هو آمن بالله ولكنه كان يرى أن ليس هناك من دين صحيح حتى ذلك الوقت. فالمسيحية تقول هؤلاء الثلاثة واحد، واليهود يقولون هم شعب الله المختار، ولكنه أدرك أن هناك إلها ولكنه لم يكن يعرف شيئا عن الإسلام حتى ذلك الوقت.
But I didn't want to stay ignorant about religions. So I said, okay, I read Bible. And I saw in the Bible there are places which you know come from God. You feel it in your heart. But you see there are places which come from man. Because this page says something that is opposite to the thing that was said a few pages ago. So I knew that Bible was written by man many years after the prophets.
قرر أن يتعلم عن الأديان وبدأ بقراءة الإنجيل ولكنه وجد في الإنجيل شيئا يلامس قلبه فأدرك أن هذا من عند الله من كلام الله الصحيح والصفحة الأخرى من الإنجيل تناقض ما قالته الصفحة الأولى فأدرك أن هناك الكثير من الكتابات كتبت بعد سنوات وأعوام طوال من الرسل.
And I bought a Quran, English translation of the Quran. And when I started reading it with the same idea that just like Bible, it was written by man, only in this case we know the name of the man, Muhammad.
ولكنه بدأ يقرأ القرآن وكان ظانا أنه يقرأه كما قرأ الإنجيل أو الأناجيل من قبل ظنا منه أنه سيجد به بعض الأجزاء من عند الله وبعضها الآخر كتبها إنسان ما عرف اسمه محمد.
And then when I was maybe about 1/3 in Quran, I remember telling my wife, you know, this Muhammad, he must have been a very smart, very intelligent man because this book is very clear, very logical, very easy to follow, and there are no contradictions.
في ذات المرات كان يقرأ وقال لزوجته لابد أن محمدا كان ذكيا للغاية فهذا الكتاب الذي جاء به سهل تماما ومنطقي في تسلسله وترتيبه ولا يجد الإنسان أي صعوبة في التعامل معه.
But then as I read later, I suddenly saw a scientific fact which I knew was only discovered in the 20th century.
ولكنه أثناء قراءته لفت نظره آية تتكلم عن حاجة علمية شيء علمي لم يكتشف إلا في هذا القرن العشرين.
So immediately I saw that Muhammad is not the author of the Quran. That Muhammad is a messenger sent by God to give the Quran to mankind.
وهنا,
So
وهنا أدرك أن محمدا ليس هو كاتب هذا النص ولكنه رسول أرسله له بهذا الكتاب للناس.
So I saw, mashallah, Muhammad Rasulullah.
قال أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله محمد رسول أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله.
So I said, mashallah, I'm a Muslim.
ثم قال ما شاء الله أنا مسلم، أصبح مسلما بتلاوته للشهادة.
And people ask me, well, how did you react? You said you heard bad things about Muslims, you didn't know anything about Islam. How did you react? Did you want to be Muslim?
هناك من سأل كيف أسلمت؟ إنك تعرف أشياء سيئة عن المسلمين ولم تكن تعرف كثيرا عن دينهم، فكيف أسلمت؟ ماذا حدث؟
So, mashallah, when that was the greatest blessing on my wife, of my life. I have wonderful family, I have wonderful children, wife, everything, but the greatest blessing was that God showed me his guidance. And when I pray, I make dua, God, please let me die as a believer. Let me never disbelieve again.
لم يكن له خيار إلا أن يكون مسلما، فكما قال أنه ولد طفلا ونمى وكبر وأدرك أنه ولد ولم يكن له في ذلك خيار، ولكنه وجد أن لا خيار له سوى الإسلام، وبذلك أصبح مسلما، وهو دائما يصلي ويدعو الله ألا يتركه يموت على ملة غير الإسلام بعد أن اهتدى إليها.
In closing, I would like to thank the organizers for making this conference possible.
في الختام يريد أن يشكر القائمين على تنظيم هذا المؤتمر بأن خرج على هذا المستوى على هذا
I
النحو.
think conferences like this are extremely useful.
وهذه المؤتمرات أعتقد أنها مفيدة ومجدية للغاية.
But I would like to appeal to the organizers that they do not make these conferences only in the Middle East. I think conferences like this should be made in London, in Frankfurt, in Paris.
ولكن
I would like to thank you for your attention. Shukran jazilan and salamun alaikum.
شكرا على